weeks, and this is Bounce. On this podcast, we talk with people from a variety of fields about dealing with challenges and adversity and how they bounce back or push through. To that end, this will be an interview format. In each episode, we're going to have conversations about setback, whether it's career or business. It could be physical or psychological pain. We're going to try to parse out how our guests dealt with it or deal with it, as the case may be, and how we can learn from it. Welcome to Bounce.
There's always been this question, is there such thing as objectivity in journalism? And the answer is no. But your body says, I have to do this right now. And your mind is saying, you don't need to do this right now. And so you're actually fighting that autonomic response. I'm standing outside in the middle of this Polish winter. You know, this is the winter that stopped the Nazi army, you know? It stopped Napoleon's army. And here I was in a bathing suit, sweating in the snow.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Bounce Podcast. Today, I'm excited. My guest is Scott Carney. Scott is an investigative journalist, an anthropologist. Scott has worked in some of the most dangerous and unlikely corners of the world. He is currently a senior fellow at the Schuster Institute for Investigative Journalism. Hopefully, I've said that right, Scott.
Yeah, that's right.
He's a Scripps Fellow at the Center for Environmental Journalism in Boulder, Colorado. I love Boulder. Is that where you are now?
No, I'm actually in Denver.
Okay.
Can't afford Boulder. Boulder's very expensive.
Really? It's hip. It's hip. His most recent book, What Doesn't Kill Us, and the subject of this particular episode of the podcast, and his other works include The Red Market and Death on Diamond Mountain. Scott was a contributing editor at Wired, and you can read his stuff in Mother Jones, Men's Journal, Playboy, Foreign Policy, Discover, Outside, and Fast Company. His work has been the subject of a variety of programs, including NPR and National Geographic. In 2010, he won the Payne Award for Ethics in Journalism for his story, Meet the Parents. And let's not confuse that with Ben Stiller. It's about international kidnapping to adoption ring. Anyway, Carney has spent extensive time in South Asia, and he speaks Hindi. Cool.
That's right. All that stuff.
Today, we're going to talk with Scott about physical resilience and recovery and how to develop it using some really unusual methods like freezing temperatures, extreme altitude, and a variety of other environmental extremes. Hence the title, What Doesn't Kill Us. And you're really going to enjoy this. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. This is great.
Man, the book is fascinating on so many levels, but the title, What Doesn't Kill Us, that's Nietzsche, right?
It is. Yeah, that which does not kill us makes us stronger.
Makes us stronger. I just want to make sure for the millennials it's not Clarkson, right?
It's also Clarkson, actually.
Okay, all right. But look, man, what a great read. First of all, as investigative journalism, looking into Wim Hof and the people you meet along, but also as a study in testing physical and mental limitations, in my opinion, right? It's also participatory journalism. You're out there doing all this stuff, and it kind of reminded me of George Plimpton. Do you remember? Do you know George Plimpton?
Of course.
Yeah.
He just died, right? Editor of the Paris Review, Sports Illustrated writer, all that stuff.
Yeah. I didn't know he just died. I'm sorry to hear that. But
I might be wrong. Maybe he's still alive and he's listening.
Yes,
not dead.
George, we love you. No, but it was kind of like that. You jumped in and did all this stuff that you write about.
Right. Yeah, so, I really believe that with the best journalism involves the writer and makes themselves part of the writing. Because, you know, there's always been this question, is there such thing as objectivity in journalism? And the answer is no, there's no objectivity in journalism. So you have to know where the journalist is coming from. And my experiences are in all of my works are sort of central to the narrative that I'm constructing.
Got it. Well, I loved it. So tell us about the book and how you came to write it.
Sure. So my, background obviously is pretty hardcore investigative journalism. Started looking at organ trafficking at the beginning of my career, and then sort of started to delve into cults and how sort of the sort of spirituality can sort of twist your mind in a way and lead to sort of really horrible consequences. And the book I had just written before this one was called The Death on Diamond Mountain, where I traced the stories of several people who had died after intensive meditation retreats, suicides or sort of accidental deaths, because they got so caught up in this idea of achieving something supernatural, like superpowers that might come through prayer or meditation, yoga, that sort of thing. And I'd exposed this guru named Michael Roach, who was teaching this sort of corrupted version of Tibetan Buddhism that was crossed with the Christian gospel of prosperity, which basically meditate and you'll become rich, meditate and you'll become an angel.
Name it and claim it or something. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. And so I was, and that book ends with a man sort of meditating until he dies in the mountains of Arizona, a really tragic story, sort of like Into the Wild. And so when I'd heard about this guy, this Dutch fitness guru named Wim Hof, he was making claims that he could teach someone to consciously control their immune system, consciously control their body temperature at will. And he was known for doing these really crazy feats, like climbing up 3/4 of the way up Mount Everest in just a pair of shorts and shoes, but bare chested in this really, and no oxygen in this really horrible environment. He holds the record for swimming under Arctic ice, sort of beneath sort of this, thick sheets of ice. He had exposed himself in ice water for 90 minutes and then sort of kept his body temperature up. So he was obviously capable of these really sort of amazing feats.
Superhuman feats, yeah, kind of.
Almost superhuman, right? They would seem that way. And then he was saying that he could teach other people this stuff. And I figured this guy was another sort of charlatan guru who was going to get people killed, when he said he could teach. So I thought that maybe he was like a genetic freak in some way. Mm-hmm. And the things that he was doing, maybe he even sincerely believed what he was doing, but, clearly it was dangerous. So I decided to fly out to Poland where he was running a training camp. This was in 2011. And, sort of learn his techniques and then sort of watch them fall apart. I expected this to be sort of a total sham, like basically trying to shill people for money.
Right. So the reason you wrote the book is you thought you'd find another kind of cult-like figure and following, and you would expose it or what have you.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I flew out there initially on an assignment for Playboy magazine, and I start learning his techniques, and lo and behold, in the matter of like a week, I'm duplicating the things that he said, his claims, right? I'm standing outside in the middle of this Polish winter. This is the winter that stops the Nazi army, it stopped Napoleon's army. And here I was in a bathing suit, sweating in the sno for an hour at a time.
Wow. Scott, one of the things that I read early, the early part of the book, which really it was a great writing, but because it captured me, because you said you looked out the window. You were in this, I don't know if it was a hut or wherever you were. You're there at the training facility, and you looked out the window, and here's some guys running. You see a guy coming in from a run in the
not even a run. So we had just gotten off we just gotten out of like Wim's dilapidated bus, right? And I get into his training center. I go up to the second floor where we're stashing our rucksacks and things like that. I look out the window, and there's this dude in his underwear.
Yeah.
His name's Andrew Lascelius, and literally just black little skivvies in the middle of this snow, and he's throwing snow on his bare chest, and there's steam erupting off. The steam
that when I read that, I'm like, holy.
I know it was bananas is what it was. And I was, I just seeing that, I was like, there's something crazy going on here. And, Andrew's really an interesting character because he I don't really explore him too much in the book, but he suffers from asthma. Has had asthma for, since childhood, and it's a crippling. And he's using these techniques to actually combat his asthma reactions. And he says it works. He's able to sort of use the stimulus of the cold to break into the autonomic functions that make his bronchial tubes clench.
Yeah, and I want to get into some of the potential healing properties, for lack of a better way to say that, or management of either pain or the immune system. But before
Sure.
that, so here's this guy who you're going to expose or find out what is the truth, and you meet him. So when you meet him, what's he like? First of all, does he know that you're there as a skeptic and to?
Yeah, he knows. He knows that I'm there, and I'm very skeptical about him. And he must be familiar with some of my previous work, where I'd exposed other gurus, because I'd had a story in Playboy come out recently about the book Death and Diamond Mountain hadn't come out yet. It was just the article had come out at that point. But I was sort of known for this sort of investigation. And what happened is that I'm a participatory journalist. Like I don't just.
But he's an open book. He's like, bring it. Come on in. I got nothing to hide.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
He's also completely crazy. Like Wim is an amazing guy, but he is, he's off his rocker in so many ways. He looks like a life-size garden gnome with a big ruddy nose. He actually had like a green pointy hat when I first met him too.
He talks in kind of not extremes, but there's his accent mixed in with his. Everything's bigger than life. You know what I mean? If you go on YouTube or something and listen to him.
Yeah, and he's always making, grandiose claims and saying things that you're like, that doesn't quite square with reality. And so a lot of like hanging out with Wim is trying to separate the crazy from the reality. And the really fun part is sometimes the crazy is the reality. And that's the amazing thing about being with him. But there's also a hell of a lot of crazy too, which is like just needs to be tossed out. And you're like, Wim, that's all great, but you're not going to get a Nobel Prize.
Yeah. So part of your discovery reporting is you're kind of trying to parse out what he's saying, all these things, what works, what doesn't, what's reality, what's not, blah, blah, blah. Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly.
So,
but it turns out, the main claims, the most interesting claims, the ones that I was there to disprove, he proves, right? He proves that I am able to control my body temperature in this extreme environment. I was coming from Los Angeles, where I had been living, it's perfectly warm, palm tree weather all the time. And in the matter of a week, I'm totally acclimatized to the cold. I feel warm in it. And we actually end up hiking up this mountain in called Snezka, which is like a ski hill. But we spent 8 hours on this mountain, in our bathing suits and shoes, basically. And it's 2 degrees Fahrenheit. So pretty darn cold. And I'm sweating the whole way up to the top. And, meanwhile, these people are skiing down the hill, and just aghast at what we're doing.
But let's talk about the method. So basically you're, and correct me if I'm wrong, but his method is to expose your body to extreme temperatures, in this case, the cold. And somehow there's, if I've got this right, there's some kind of evolutionary process where the body adapts. So there's a section in your book where you say the underlying hypothesis of the expedition is that when humans outsource comfort and endurance, they inadvertently make their bodies weaker, and that simply reintroducing some common environmental stresses to their daily routines can bring back some of that evolutionary vigor.
Right. Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself.
So the reason, this method has a purpose to get you adapted and kind of shock your system into, your ancestors, right? Say,
think about it. Like our species is 200,000 years old. That's Homo sapien sapien, and we in that time when we were coming out of Africa, right, we endured constant temperature variation. Even in the equatorial regions of the world, you could go to 110 degrees in the day and down to 50 or 40 at night. And we didn't have any serious technology. We didn't have North Face or anything like that. We had some stone tools. We had maybe some bows and arrows. We had some fur skins and bindings, and we had fire. But that pales in comparison to what we're able to have at the flip of a switch now. And in that evolutionary process, it was our bodies. Our bodies were the real technology that let us survive and let us adapt to the world around us. And the ancestors who weren't able to adapt didn't pass on their genes because they died. And with this sort of very basic level of technology, we left Africa. We colonized Europe and Asia and Australia and the New World, and it was always our bodies able to change to the environment and then deploy its resources to keep ourselves alive. And so what has happened, and in the last 100 years, when you have all of our biological needs really available at the turn of a dial or the flip of a switch, we don't have to activate those survival systems that used to be constantly on and constantly available to us. And because of that, we've let them atrophy in the modern world. And that is one of the reasons why we're not very resilient now.
Yeah, you say with no challenge to overcome, frontier to press, or threat to flee from, the humans of this millennium are overstuffed, overheated, and understimulated. Sheesh. I was already feeling like a wuss. But so tell us a training, a day in the life of this camp. So you go there, you're there to kind of expose or dig into Wim Hof, and you go through the training, you go through the daily routines. And so tell us about and you started to get into this, but tell us about some of the crazy stuff you did.
So the routine, there's really two methods, two aspects to this method. And the first is a breathing routine where you're trying to stimulate your fight or flight responses, to activate them and then modulate and control them. And what it is basically hyperventilating, where you do these, I'll show you what it sounds like. It's and you just keep on breathing like that, deep, full mouth breaths, and until you get really dizzy and sort of lightheaded, and you're blowing off all the CO2 out of your system is what you're doing here. And then you exhale at the end of this. Let's say you do about a minute or about 30 of these breaths, and then you exhale. So you're holding your lungs empty, and you just hold your breath as long as you can, and you're getting to that point where you need to gasp, right? Where you need I need to take a breath of air, and you just keep on holding it, not till you pass out, but you're trying to press that sort of frontier, if you will. And then once you realize you have to breathe, you take a deep breath in, and then you repeat the process and you start hyperventilating again. And you can keep on doing these repetitions, for an hour if you want. But every time you realize that you can hold your breath longer and longer and longer. And, I do this every morning. I do have a 15-minute routine that I do. And the first time I'll hold my breath for 1 minute with empty lungs, and then I'll hold it for 2 minutes with empty lungs, and I'll hold it for 3 minutes with empty lungs. And it's, surprisingly easy after you've sort of gotten into
3 minutes
this.
is, what's the longest you've held your breath?
I think 5. I don't really try to push the upper limit.
That's amazing.
I'm not trying to.
Tim Ferriss said he held his once for 8, which is mind-boggling. So
sure.
So the basis of this, or the foundation, again, correct me if I'm wrong, is the breath or breathing. These exercises, and then
and getting and not just the breathing, but that mental control you have over that gasp reflex. That's very critical to this.
When you get into cold. Is that what you mean by gasp reflex? No, go ahead.
Gasping means you want to breathe, right? It's the moment where you have to gasp, right, for air. That is what you're working on here. And And the breathing is just one way to get to that. And the gas reflex is really interesting because that's where your sort of body meets the mind, right? That's what your body says, I have to do this right now. And your mind is saying, you don't need to do this right now. And so you're actually fighting that autonomic response when you're getting to that point. And then you find that you can extend it and extend it, extend it. And then your unconscious systems cede a little bit of control to your conscious mind. And that's really what you're trying to work on here. And it's interesting, after you do these breath repetitions, at the end of that, then you'll do one more breathing round, let all the air out of your lungs and just start doing push-ups. And the first time I did this, I could do, usually I could do 20 push-ups. It's just normally if I was going to do push-ups right then, I could do 20. I did this breathing technique and I did 40 right off the bat, just from the breathing exercise. And I'm doing it without breathing, with empty lungs.
So hang on. The most you ever did was what?
20.
20. And then you doubled it just with
the breathing.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And now I can hit up to 80 if I'm.
Is it oxygen saturation? Why is that? Why do you think that?
Two things are going on. You're normally your body is about 90. Your blood runs at about 97, 98% oxygen saturation. So the breathing will bring it up to 100%, and that's not that big of a deal. But the other thing you're doing is blowing off CO2, which is the byproduct of respiration. It's sort of this acidic air, right? And when you blow off CO2, it's interesting. The gasp reflex that moment where your body says, okay, I have to breathe, is not connected to the amount of oxygen that you have in your blood. For some unknown evolutionary reason, your body can only detect CO2. So when you've blown off all the CO2, you've actually sort of hacked your body so it doesn't know when you're supposed to gasp, essentially. And so that's one of the reasons why you can hold your breath longer, is because you just sort of altered your physical chemistry while you're doing it. And then you're also sort of doing this mental control on top of that.
So using this foundation, the breathing, what have you, tell us some of the crazy, you just told us one, that you were able to double your output from a standpoint of push-ups very right. easily just with the breath. But you were able to tell us some of the things that you did while you were there that it blew your mind. You didn't think you would be able to do it. So go ahead.
The other one is hiking up the mountain, and going from standing barefoot in the cold. At first, I could only stand out in the snow in my bathing suit for about 5 minutes before it was so painful. I didn't want to be there anymore.
And
right?
The temperature. What was the temperature there?
I think we're talking around 2 degrees Fahrenheit okay. Most of the time.
That's cold. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's cold, and maybe it was a little warmer here and there, but it was below freezing for sure. And I could stand there for 5 minutes before it was like, I have to go inside. That was my first experience. It felt like I was burning. It was so cold, and that's sort of funny that the nervous system works like that. But the next day I went out. I could stand there for 10 minutes before the same sensations set in. And then, we would keep on doing various cold exposures. By the end of a week, I'm standing out there comfortably for an hour. And the body just adapted very, very quickly. I never expected it.
What's comfortably? You didn't feel the cold, or you felt it less, or what? What's comfortable?
Well, the thing is people ask me this all the time. It's like, you just don't feel cold anymore. And no, you do feel the cold. You have the stimulus of the cold, but you're not worried about it, because part of that experience of getting into the cold and feeling pain is it's partially panic in your body, right, and your mind, and because you're not used to it, because you're not used to doing things that push you out of your comfort zone, your body starts ringing the alarm bells very, very early. So what you're doing is just getting it comfortable with the idea that, hey, look, 5 minutes out here is not going to kill me. And your body's like, oh, okay, yeah, okay, well, maybe 10 minutes will kill you. I'll ring my alarm bells then. So you're just sort of pushing that limit. And, 10 minutes in the cold, an hour standing outside, is not thermodynamically going to ruin you, right? You're going to be all right. And so you're just teaching your body where its natural survival limits really are, because we don't have experience with that.
So I just want to, do a little shout out warning, please be careful if you're out there listening to this and you're going to, if it's You know, make sure you have proper training and some kind of supervision. You know, if there's somebody listening to this, make sure you're not in water. If you're, trying to hold your breath. Yeah, don't be dumb.
Don't be stupid. And don't go out on never having done this before, go on some Arctic expedition with no warm gear. I mean, you always have to have backup plans. And you're right, never do this underwater. And this is one thing. So, you can hold your breath for, 5 minutes. That's great. Free divers would love that. It's something to give them an edge. But 3 or 4 people have died using this method because when you're blowing off CO2, you don't really have, you've sort of tricked your gasp reflex, but you haven't completely fooled it. You haven't overcome biology. So there's this chance that you can pass out doing these methods unexpectedly with no sort of warning to it. And that underwater is really, really bad for your health. On dry land, lying down where you're doing this breathing, it's really not that big of a deal. But it's very dangerous to do this in water.
So but I do want to make the point that there's it seems to be some very beneficial things physically, and I want to explore the mental aspect because there seems to be a mind over matter type of ability here, and using the breath, which is really what I want to talk to you about and kind of get to is that our limits are much farther out, it seems, than what we perceive. And you threw yourself into this and found that out physically, that you could do much more than you thought, right?
Right.
Partly by seeing people who are modeling it. I mean, he's able to do some crazy things. He was, I read that he was injected with some kind of toxin, and he was able to. That's true, right? I mean, he was monitored, and he was able to fight off this toxin.
Well, sort of. So this is called it's the endotoxin test. So Wim had made the claim that he could consciously suppress his immune system, right? And so a doctor took him up on that, and this Peter Pickers over at Radboud University in the Netherlands, who develops tests for immune suppressant drugs. So these are the drugs you might take if you get a kidney transplant, and usually your body will reject the kidney because it's a foreign piece of tissue. It'll treat it like an invader and eat it. So what you need to do when you're getting a kidney transplant is to suppress your immune system and to basically turn it off so it doesn't go eat the kidney that's supposed to save your life. Now he develops tests for the drugs to see if the drugs work, because they're always sort of coming up with new immunosuppressive drugs. And what he does is injects somebody with it's called endotoxin, which is basically E. coli bacteria that has all the signatures on its cell wall saying that this is an infection, except it's been killed. So it's not actually pathogenic, right? It doesn't actually make you sick. But your body, when injected with endotoxin, will respond by giving you a primary immune response, which means sort of achy joints, high fever, the chills, all the sort of stuff that you get when you get the flu. Usually what happens is after an hour or so, the body's like, okay, this isn't a big deal. And then you sort of revert to normal. Now, to test an immune suppressive drug, they'll inject you with endotoxin. If you have the drug in you and it works, you're not going to have any fever response. You're not going to have any immune response to it. And then the drug works. Well, Wim made the claim that he could do the same thing as an immunosuppressive drug and just resist suppress his immune system consciously. So that is not, up until that point, this is considered impossible. It's like there's no way to consciously affect your immune system. But they injected him with the drug, and they injected him with endotoxin, and he said, I will suppress it. And lo and behold, he did. There was no immune response. The blood levels all showed normal. In fact, they showed better than normal in some cases. When they withdrew the blood from his body, it actually remained resistant to endotoxin for 3 days, which is astounding. That's right? Astounding. And so what's so amazing about this is not only was he able to consciously suppress his immune response, but the applications for that suggest that his method could be useful for any autoimmune illness, anything like rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, anything like mouth ulcers. Like if your immune system is attacking itself, and Wim's method can turn it off, hey, you've got a cure right there, or at least a treatment right there. And so this was a huge finding when it came out. And then, obviously the scientific community was very skeptical of a claim that is, deemed impossible. So the next year, and this is actually the week after I was in Poland, they ran another test where they took 12 college students, taught them all the Wim Hof method, which is basically the same exact training that I did, standing in the snow, climbing up mountains, jumping in cold lakes, doing the breathing. They taught them that for only 1 week. And then they injected all of those people with endotoxin, and they all had the same results. They all were able to suppress their immune responses. And that's astounding, because not only was Wim not just a genetic freak, this method is then teachable. So this is really the scientific basis for why people are really, really excited about the Wim Hof method.
Well, that's what got me excited as I was reading. In fact, you have some stories, and I want to talk about the immune benefits and to get into this a little more, because there are some people that you met who were students of Wim's. One guy had severe rheumatoid arthritis, and he, I was reading where he couldn't bend. There was a finger, his whole body was racked, but he couldn't bend a finger. And then at the end of, he was giving you some kind of encouragement, and then he lifted his finger that he had a problem with, and he was bending it with no problem.
Yeah, so this is Hank Vendenberg, and so rheumatoid arthritis is when your joints eat themselves, basically. Your body starts looking at the joints as a foreign invader, and it just sort of disintegrates them. It's crippling for him. The condition was almost like the end stages of AIDS. Is the way he describes it. Stuck in bed all the time, taking increasingly large doses of steroids in order to subdue the symptoms, but the steroids weren't working anymore because you build up resistance to them. He thought of himself as basically a goner, and in fact, his mother had died of the same condition. So the progress was sort of obvious to him. He starts doing the Wim Hof training. He goes to a training in the Netherlands, and his life just transforms completely in the course of, I think, 6 months or a year. Now the timeline's a little messed for me, but it's between 6 months and a year. He goes from being basically bedridden and crippled to someone who is, top physical form, doing runs around his village, and he actually ends up with Wim climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, the highest point in Africa, in just a bathing suit with him after a couple of years of this training. So complete reversal, bounce back, if you will.
Yes. So, and that's what, I have a small, I'm an avid tennis player. I play a lot, and I play singles. But I'm older. I'm getting old, and I have some arthritis building in my knees, and I'll try anything once. If somebody says, "Hey, this is going to work," so I'll rub sheep shit on it if I have to. But I'm reading this, and obviously I'm nowhere near the condition these guys are in. But I'm like, wow, this is really I'm interested for me. What is possible? Right. But let me ask you, what is this a combination of? Maybe some kind of placebo, or are you convinced that this is they are able to kind of control their immune system and kind of heal or manage?
Well, one of the questions is, of course, what is a placebo, right? This is a major question in science in general, right? The idea behind a placebo is that the body has the ability to heal itself in some ways. And when you give someone a sugar pill, sometimes the body will just get better, even though the pill has no pharmacological action. And you'll see the placebo effect. And this is why we test drugs, right, against sugar pills, is because sometimes people just get better inexplicably. But we spent a lot of time developing drugs that we can sell on the market, and judging them against the healing power of placebos. And while for some things, like antibiotics, for instance, You don't want a placebo. You want the antibiotic, right? But for other things like cancer treatments, some cancer treatments are only effective like 8% of the time, and the placebo is like 6% of the time. So it only has like a marginal 2% over placebo, but that's enough to say, hey, this drug works. But that 6% is very, very interesting, right? That 6% is like, well, something other mechanism is healing the person, and so maybe this is the placebo effect.
That's what I was about to say. Maybe that's what this is. But what I was talking about is it? Do you think it is a result of the breathing and the training methods, or do you understand what I'm asking? I think
my answer is yes to that. I think that because if you think about the immune system as this sort of predator, let's use a metaphor, right? It's this predator running around your body, like a pack of wolves, trying to attack the things that come in it that make you sick. Pathogens, viruses, parasites, bacteria, whatever it is. And in the world that we live in now, we have very few stimuli coming in. We don't have a ton of bacteria. We've modulated the environment so there's not that much stuff coming at us. Definitely not what we had evolutionarily. But we have this system that developed in our ancient past, and the predators are bored, right? And they're going around their body and they're like, okay, I'm going to go chomp on your joints because I'm bored and this is my job to go chomp on stuff. And so these methods, and these are metaphors, right? So scientists are right now rolling their eyes at me. But what this method does is essentially give that predator a chew toy. It gives it something to do. And the fighter, and interestingly enough, the fight or flight responses, which is the thing you're working on in the breathing and the thing you're working on when you're jumping into the cold, those are connected to the immune system. They all sort of come from the same spot. So if you're able to affect your fight or flight, you're able to affect the immune system. And that's the theory behind this. And it absolutely works. I've seen it work for myself. I obviously I don't have a crippling autoimmune illness, but I've always had these mouth ulcers since I was an infant. They're called canker sores. They're on the inside of the mouth, and they're autoimmune in nature. So they become these big white round things. And for me, I was particularly affected by this for whatever reason. And they could get the size of dimes, so really large. Painful to talk, painful to smile. It would just make me miserable. And I tried everything I could to get rid of these things. I put iodine on them at one point. I was putting salt on them. I used every sort of medicine, both Western, homeopathic, and whatever I could, and nothing worked to stem them. But I start doing these breathing methods, and I don't get them anymore. Or if I do get them, they go away in a day after doing the breathing. It's because I've suppressed the immune response that started them.
Did you, as a byproduct, or did you focus your thinking and the breathing exercises and the whole method? Did you focus on, hey, I don't want that?
No, it was just a total byproduct. I was not expecting it at all. And now when I get it, I do think about it. If I have like a little tiny one starting, I'll think at it. But I don't think it matters. I think it's just you're doing the breathing, and it's a global sort of total system thing.
That's cool, because there was, again, we go back to this mind over matter, which this is what's, Scott, this is exciting stuff. I'm surprised there's not more out there, in the overall. Or maybe there is more information about this, but I'm assuming it's just going to continue to grow as it's out there. But I may not be saying is right. Vandenberg, is that the guy with
Vandenberg? Yeah,
so,
Dutch names are hard.
So he did a visualization along with the breathing, where he said he started to think of his body as a game of Pac-Man, and his bones were little pellets around the screen, and Pac-Man was this disease eating its way through his skeleton, and and he kind of visualized and kind of thought through this process to fight back, right?
Right.
He also gave you, I thought was a great visualization when you were going up the mountain. He said when the wind rips across the face of the mountain, you need to take a mental umbrella and use it to part the air in front of you.
Right.
I thought that was really cool. But that's kind of what you guys are doing with this method, right? It's kind of you stated that you were able to maintain body heat by thinking warm thoughts. Like I think you conjured up an image of a campfire in your belly.
At various points I use campfires or dragons or whatever looks warm to me at that moment.
Yeah. So, but I think it's very cool because it goes back to this, controlling or managing body systems that you thought were not manageable, right?
Right.
The immune system, you're able to walk around in the cold and be comfortable. You're able to do ice plunges and all these things.
Right.
It's really quite fascinating. How does someone learn this at home?
It's very, very easy, honestly, because and the reason it's easy is because we're so far behind because of how comfortable we are all the time. We live in this sort of narrow band of heat that's around 72 degrees for all of us, and it gets too hot, we turn up the AC or the fans or whatever we have. And when it gets too cold, we ramp up the heat. So we're able to maintain this very narrow band of temperature variation. What you do, the easiest way in, is just to expand that band, right? In the winter, don't turn up your heat so much. In the summer, don't turn on your AC, probably ever. And just let your body initially deal with some being uncomfortable.
Hang on a second.
Right?
Hang on a second. So I'm in Florida. In the summer, don't turn on the AC. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I said that. And also work out in the heat. Not so much that you get dizzy and pass out. You have to be a little careful with heat because heat has some different properties than the cold. But in general, get your body working in this environment, and then you will become more resilient to the environment. You don't need to use the Wim Hof method of doing this. Just acclimatize yourself to variation. Now, do it in stages if you need to, be reasonable about it, but think about variation and how your body naturally can adapt to it. And don't just immediately run for comfort. That's the very first thing that you can do. Another thing is take cold showers in the morning. You can start with hot, but end cold all the time. And when that water is coming on you, and this is critical, when the water's coming on you, or if you jump into ice water, or since you're in Florida, you're jumping into the Atlantic, which is probably cold in the winter, right? You go in there, and instead of tensing and using your muscles to heat yourself by shivering or just clenching up, you have to will yourself to relax into that cold. And what this is doing, your body has a couple ways to heat itself. The first way is just simple muscle activity that will generate heat just through the sort of muscle activity in general. And that's what shivering is. That's what that clenching is. This is your fight or flight response activating. Now, what you're actually other way.
Real quick. So instead of bracing myself for it, relax into it. Is that
right? Exactly. And so then when you relax, your body has a different way of dealing with things, which is it can turn on your metabolic activity to heat itself instead. And literally what your body will do is suck white fat from your system. So think about that spare tire around your belly. It will suck it up and burn it directly for heat energy. And there's a whole metabolic process here that's involved something called brown fat or brown adipose tissue that we don't really need to get into it here. But essentially, your body can decide that the fat you have, and in fact, the reason why we have white fat, or one of the main reasons, is not because it's there in order to keep you alive when you're low on calories. Like, it's not there to get you through the winter, although it can be used for that. But you'll notice that if you're sort of overweight and you're trying to get rid of your belly, it's hard to exercise that off your body. That's just not one of the things your body wants to do. It would actually rather burn muscle tissue in many cases than it would want to burn fat. And what it's really there for, or one of its primary purposes, is as stored heat energy. It's like kindling for your metabolism. And so the quickest way to lose weight is actually to jump into ice water repeatedly and then suppress your shiver response. And your body was like, okay, this is what you're evolutionary there for, and it just sucks that white fat from your system and burns it.
What is the shiver responance? How does the shiver response is counteracting?
That's muscle activity. Yeah,
it's counteracting. It's counteracting the weight loss benefit?
No, it still works. I mean, the shivering.
You said fight it. You said fight or suppress it.
You should fight it. You should suppress it because it'll more directly go towards metabolic activity if you suppress it. But it's not like shivering is bad. Like the point of this book is not to say that shivering is a bad physiological response. It's just not the one we're trying to work on. We're trying to work on this metabolic side of things.
Got it.
When you're shivering, you're still probably using the metabolic processes as well, because the shivering alone is not what is not the only thing that's going on in your body. Your body has millions of things happening at once. But you can focus and enhance the metabolic activity. And this is why in the book I talk about, there's three pillars of human. There's two historically we've always said there's two pillars of human health, right? Which is diet and exercise. It's the food you put into your body and the way you used it through moving your body, right? And this is like then the cornerstone of everything, every diet ever. But what I suggest in the book is there's a third pillar, which is the environment that we inhabit. And by using environmental stimuli, you can actually work on that equation in different ways. And being cold is really useful for human health. And natural variations are really useful because we've always had them evolutionarily. We've always dealt with it. It's only in the last blink of an evolutionary eye that we have been in, what you can call homeostasis, or sort of a static environment.
So to get back to apply this at home, you're saying just gradually introduce the environment that you're in, whether it's heat in the summer or cold in the winter, and then start slowly exposing. Or are you suggesting exposing to more and more extremes? So if I take a cold shower, I mean, there's still benefits from that. I don't have to jump in an ice tub, right? Or
no.
Do I? Okay.
No, you don't have to, but you can, right? Work up to it. I mean, but because you're in such a static environment right now, even small changes will do big metabolic things. Because the difference between a 40-degree shower and whatever it is in Florida right now, like 80 degrees, that's 40-degree change. That's not ice water, but that can be a huge
that's enough.
thing.
Okay,
it's enough.
What about?
But you can do more.
What about recovering from injury? So is this also, I'm assuming, helpful for that?
Yes. So that is, I have less hard medical data suggesting injury recovery. And in fact, there are some weird studies out there that suggesting like ice baths right after working out will not help you recover, because you actually need. So when you jump in the cold, one of the things that happens is you have an anti-inflammatory response.
Right. You get constricted. Yeah.
You stop that swelling happening. And if you want to like bulk up because you want to work out, right, and you want to get big pecs or whatever, you actually need the inflammation process to make the overall muscle tissue grow. So if you actually just do work out and then jump in ice water to decrease inflammation, you actually won't get the benefits of the workout.
What if I jump into a hot tub after that?
I think you need to jump. I don't. This is not my specialty, so I'm not going to give. You can go. I mean, there's lots of guys to talk to about that.
Should you not? Well, then So if you get injured, should you back off of the daily practice? Go ahead.
Right. So I hadn't gotten into injury yet. So I was just talking about the workout effects. But so with injury, anti-inflammatory responses is great because inflammation can be very counterproductive. It can actually hurt tissues quite a bit. Evolutionarily, one of the reasons why we have an inflammatory response is to stabilize a wound, right? So you don't want it flopping about everywhere. But now we have like Band-Aids and other things that will do that same thing better. And inflammation is actually can lead to more sort of chronic problems down the line. So jumping into ice water is super good for sort of inflammation control. This is why you get an injury, you put an ice pack on it. I mean, this is not just the Wim Hof method. This is just established medical science. But one of the craziest stories that I came across in my research was this story of Casper van der Molen, who is one of the sort of the top Wim Hof instructor. He's the one who I think is, if anyone wants to train in the Wim Hof method, they should get Casper to teach them the method. It's because he's just so much more articulate.
Yeah,
than
that was
Wim.
a fascinating story. That was really fascinating.
So, but what happened to him is he was running this half marathon in Holland, and he came up behind a horse And for whatever reason, the horse was skittish and kicked him and just smashed his arm and rib with, sort of a horse hoof strike. And it broke his humerus. One of the bones in his arm broke. And he was like, wow, this is terrible. I got hit by a horse, but I'm going to use this as a training for my Wim Hof stuff. And I'm just going to try to heal myself with the Wim Hof breathing. So they took him to the hospital and, they set his bone because you can't breathe your bone back into position, right? You need it to be set. But when he goes into surgery, he doesn't take general anesthesia for this. They just do a local anesthetic. He doesn't take the opium or morphine that they were offering because he just wants to breathe through it, because the Wim Hof method is actually really good for pain control, because that's all sort of fight or flight as well. And, and then, after the surgery, he does this breathing method continuously for like 4 days, which is probably more work than anyone should put into this. But he does it, and he's just thinking at his injury, and it heals so much faster than anyone at the hospital had ever seen any wound heal. He's just breathing, and so he does this mental exercise where he pulls air. He visualizes it going to his arm. It's sort of that hippy-dippy meditation stuff, but it works over 4 days. It's like they didn't even know which rib had been hit by the horse.
Yeah, he was doing a combination of intense breathing, those breathing exercises, along with these visualizations that you mentioned.
Right. I mean, it's amazing that his story. He showed me the photos, and I was just astounded.
Yeah, that story blew me away. Which brings me to this, the mental, mind over matter type thing. So there are, one of the students said that conquering new challenges became a way of life. They started doing Wim Hof, and he found that as soon as he started doing difficult things, that everything else in life got easier. So,
right. Yeah, that's Casper, actually. That's his quote.
Right. So I want to. Was that your experience? In other words, because does it bleed to the psyche? This training that you have and doing and have applied to your life, is it make you better in other areas? And better, I shouldn't use that term, but do you know what I mean? Is it helping you in other areas? So that's hard to say, because my life has always involved ridiculous challenges, right? Being an investigative journalist always has things for me to confront. I've done the war correspondent thing. I've done mafia and organ trading investigations. I've done a lot of hard stuff. So you're already mentally tough.
I think I've been mentally tough for a long time. What has happened, what I've noticed, is I don't really worry about being cold, or I don't really worry about going outside and being a little bit uncomfortable. I can handle it. It's not gonna, it has shown me where my physical limits are better, and shown me that I can do things more resiliently. And I end the book doing sort of a really big challenge, right, where I end up climbing up Mount Kilimanjaro, in the highest point in Africa, up to the rim of the volcano. And I'm wearing just a pair of shorts almost the entire way up to the top. And not only that, more impressively, is that Kilimanjaro, it's not actually a difficult mountain. It's a sort of a glorified hike, from a technical perspective. There's no ropes or crampons or anything that you need. But the challenge, and the reason why Kili only has like a 60% success rate over the normal ascent of 5 to 10 days, is because the altitude sickness, which is, as you go up, the air gets thinner, your blood, you need more volume of blood to carry the oxygen to your tissues. And if you don't do it well, and you don't watch yourself, people die all the time on this mountain because of AMS. And we decided to climb up the mountain using Wim's breathing methods, so rapid, focused breathing. And we basically just sprinted up the mountain in our skivvies. And I made it to the top in 28 hours, which is a lot faster than the 5 days where most people, will do it. And even at the 5-day mark, you have a 60% failure rate. So it was a remarkable thing. And the U.S. Army predicted that I would die on this trip.
Really?
And lo and behold, we didn't. Right? We actually proved that not only me, but we had 30 people in our group, and I think 26 or 27 people made it to the top in that time frame.
And that kind of reset what you thought was possible for yourself, right? It kind of expanded. Hey, I can do more than I thought I could, right?
Right.
So
absolutely.
Tell us about the wedge. I like this concept of the wedge, where it's. Go ahead. Sorry.
So this idea is what I think is the heart of what this method is all about, which is, for instance, with the shiver response, you are suppressing your shiver response in order to control your heat, your bodily heat. So you're not actually mentally increasing your heat energy. You're not going directly to heat. What you're doing is suppressing one thing to entice another physiological response to happen. And this is what I call the wedge. You're putting a wedge between your body and your mind. And you know what your body can do. So you use your mind to stop a different thing from happening. And as you sort of ram that wedge harder into your breathing exercises or your shiver response or really anything else that has a predictable physiological output, you really just grow your power to control your body with your mind. And it's amazing. And you can apply this concept of resisting a stimulus to things like sneezing. Like you could teach yourself never to sneeze again. I don't know if you would want to, right? Because I think sneezing is probably a useful thing to do, but you could actually, because you can resist a sneeze mentally, you can just not do it. Or if someone tickles you, if you're a very ticklish person, you can also just say, okay, I won't be ticklish. This isn't ticklish. And you just sort of resist that stimulus. And then you actually grow your mind mentally stronger. And you could use this for holding your bladder for as long as you want to. Again, not recommended because you probably need to pee sometimes, right? But you could train yourself to do this. And you actually already do, right? When you're driving in your car, you have to pee. You're like, I'm going to wait till the gas station. I'm just not going to let it out right now. So you're already working on the wedge. This is sort of a natural human thing. But you're working on that mental fortitude. You could use it to delay an orgasm for indefinitely or not. You can do all of these things physiologically. So that's what I'm looking at in the book.
It's very cool. And I would think it could apply to other areas of your life. A life outside of just the physical. I mean, I would think using this physical training, you could then adopt it and maybe apply it elsewhere. So, I'm going into a meeting and I need to prepare for somebody's going to make fun of me or what have you. My response is going to be X. In other words, you mentally rehearse what the response is prior to the event, which is kind of what you're talking about, right? The water's going to be cold, but I am not going to freak out or whatever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, emotionally, if someone insults you, you can fly off the handle, or you could say, I'm going to just let it roll off my shoulders. And that's a mental choice that you make, right? You may have this initial physical sensation of anger, but it doesn't mean you have to respond to it. So that's a similar concept as well.
But my thinking is you could train yourself to be able to do that by doing it physically first. In other words, using your body to kind of affect your mental responses, and I would think then that it would be, once you have that kind of control, you're like, well, hey, let me apply it to these other areas of my life. You know what I mean? That's what I was talking about as far as the bleed. So very cool. So. Because one of the things that, and you do talk about heat acclimation, and you talk about, because I was thinking, I play in 90-degree heat in Florida in the summer, and sometimes it gasses me out, right?
Right. Yeah, totally.
So I was reading your book from that standpoint to say, I just need to make sure I train in that kind of weather. Are there any other type of physical mental hacks or anything that can help you with heat, dealing with heat? This is me.
Yeah, I mean, so the same principles can be applied to heat. The same basic concepts of the wedge all work with heat. The problem with the heat is that as you train in it, it can be potentially more dangerous because, and the reason why the Wim Hof method focuses on the cold is because when your body temperature lowers, there's a fatal point to that, right? But it's easier to heat your body back up to a safe temperature than it is from a very heightened state. and then to bring it down effectively. It's just, thermodynamics. It's easier to warm up than it is to cool off. And so, you remember there was this case of people meditating in a sweat lodge in Arizona. They just kept these guys there, and like 3 or 4 people died. It's because they were probably doing a very similar type of technique, stressing out their body and showing that they could manage it. But when things go wrong, you need to be prepared for it. So, when you're on that tennis court and it's 90 degrees, you don't want to give yourself heat stroke, right? That's not the training method, right? It's to slowly build up acclimation and get used to the environment until the environment is too strong and overpowers you. But so the first time you do it, you're going to be more susceptible than the second, third, and fourth time you do it. It's just the way of weather. And you always want to practice. You always want to push your limits, but you also don't want to push past. So there's sort of this balance that you need to maintain.
So would things like hot yoga, things like that, where you're constantly training, be beneficial long-term for endurance in the heat? Okay.
I would think so. Yeah. I mean, I
or saunas
don't know
or
much
whatever.
about Bikram or hot yoga, but I don't do it personally, but I think the concepts behind it are very strong. I think that it's something that would be beneficial.
What do you think about cryotherapy?
What is that? Oh, cryo.
Cryo. You're in some kind of enclosed, some kind of casing that
nitrogen or whatever. Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, I think they're building on the same concepts, but it's I feel like it's using a very advanced technology to stimulate this fat burning properties or the anti-inflammatory properties, and it's sort of doing it too easy, right? It's going back to this idea that we're letting technology find these answers and make them available at the touch of a button, because you only stay in cryo for a minute or two or something. It's a very short thing, and yet you can trigger. You don't need to work on the wedge with this. They're still trying to make it this external button you push, and then that's all you do, and you're out. And so I think it works, right? I don't have any doubt that it does what they want it to, which is anti-inflammatory and helps recovery from a physical perspective. But ice water does the same thing, right? I mean, you don't need to go to negative 200 and whatever degrees for 8 minutes when you can jump in to ice water for a few and do the same stuff. So I see it as sort of a gimmick in a way. Not that it doesn't work. It's just that
somebody capitalizing on that process and doing it for you, versus you doing it for yourself.
Why not just fill a tub with ice? I mean, ice is a perfectly fine technology.
Yeah. So tell, and we need to kind of wrap this up. I'm conscious of the time. This is absolutely fascinating. Tell us about your 15-minute workout. Is it breathing in the push-ups? Go ahead.
Right. So it's these deep, conscious breathing, sort of hyperventilation. I do 3 rounds of it. So the first round, 30 breaths. Sometimes I'll do 40 breaths. Let all the air out of my lungs and hold it for a minute or more. And then I do it again for another, there's a recovery breath there, about 15 seconds where you just take a half breath in and just wait. And then you repeat the process. So another 30 breaths, let all the air out of your lungs, hold it. And I do it for 2 minutes. And then the third time I'll hold it for 3 minutes. And when I've hit 3 minutes, I figure that I've done the basic job I needed to. And that takes about 12 minutes, I think, is what that takes. And then you do one more round of breathing. And then you just do push-ups with empty lungs. And I usually do about 50, I think, in my morning routine. If I do an empty lung breath, I'll do 50. If I'll do a full lung breath, I'll do between 60 and 80, depending on where my physical level is. And then I do a headstand for a minute or so, and then I'm done. That's my 15-minute workout. And whenever I take my shower for the day, I finish it with about a minute of cold water, and that's it. That's the maintenance routine.
Do you meditate?
That is meditation.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. The breathing is a way to force your mind into a meditative state, because you're working so hard physically and you're clearing your mind as you do it, that it is meditation. It's just not what you generally think of as like mindfulness, but it is a way to push your mind into that state where you're working on the wedge.
So if people want to learn kind of do some of these things at home, and you gave us some instruction there. Obviously, they can read your book and learn about that experience. But are there reliable places on the interwebs that can go and learn some of the breathing?
Oh yeah, you just put this into YouTube and you'll find all sorts of people doing the Wim Hof method, and there are various levels of quality of instruction, but the ideas are very simple. Like I don't think a lot of people are going to be severely misleading on it, because you can learn this method in like 15 or 20 minutes. It's not hard. You can listen to my book. I have it on audiobook. It's on Amazon as well as normal books, and this information is out there with anyone who just wants to find it.
Outside of this experience with Wim, was there anything else any other information that you were confronted with that contradicted what your existing beliefs were?
I mean, I'm always being challenged on my beliefs, right? That's the fun of being a journalist, right? Is that you go out there and you have an idea and then you test it in the world. I like having my mind blown. It's a fun experience.
This is Scott. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on. I want to start. I want to try this. Right.
Good.
I want to. I do some mindfulness meditation. I work out, and I'm always trying new things, or at least trying to discover what might be helpful here and there. Like I said, I'll try anything once, but your book has really got me. I mean, I heard about Wim, the Wim method, and Wim Hof, and I've heard other interviews, but your book is really. There was just something interesting about you going through the experience and reporting the day to day and saying, "Hey, this was my experience." That makes it a little more accessible. Maybe it's like, oh, wait a minute, maybe if he can do it, maybe I can try this. And he's vouching for it. Yeah.
And I'm not a super athlete. You don't need to be like a crazy super in shape person to get benefits out of this. And I think that's sort of one of the reasons why people have liked this book, is because I don't present myself as a superhuman. These are just human powers that we all have and that we can access. Yeah.
And I also like the idea of using the environment to send signals to our brain that we can handle life stress, and we can bounce back. We're tougher than we may think we are. Right. I like that. Super cool. Scott, thank you so much, man.
Thanks a lot. It's great to be here, and let's stay in touch.
Okay, we'll do.
All right. Thanks a lot.